Good morning. My name is Liska Stefko, and I'm associate priest at St. Clement's, and it's my joy to reflect on this scripture with you this morning. It's amazing what happens when we stop. At times over the past 16 months, because of the pandemic, travel by air, land, and sea has ground to a halt, clearing their usually noisy, polluted, and crowded byways. It didn't take long for new signs of life to appear in these newly vacant spaces. In Wales, mountain goats strolling through the streets of a coastal resort town, stopping to graze on manicured hedges. In Chile, cougars descending from the Andes Mountains outside the capital city to roam the streets of Santiago. In Albania, pink flamingos and curly pelicans enjoying the cleaner and quieter air, venturing out of their usual nature reserves to socialize, resulting in a population boon. And in Italy, a pair of striped dolphins, mother and child, far from their usual waters of the southern Adriatic, wandering into the Grand Canal in Venice. It took a fleet of 9 rescue boats nearly 3 hours to escort them back out toward the open water. For all of these, in the absence of noise and movement, a space for the beautiful, the wild, and the unexpected to emerge. At the same time, I'm not sure the same can be said of humanity in terms of our work habits. In the global economy of the pandemic, those deemed essential workers have continued to go to their workplaces, hospitals and other places of human care, to warehouses, to fields, and to food processing plants. These who supported our health and our economy have continued to labor at greater personal risk of exposure to COVID-19. And for those of us who could manage to work from home, the pandemic has not necessarily led to a new kind of spaciousness in our lives. Though our commuting time and our physical travel have been curtailed, our work has migrated from the office into our personal spaces, creating a workday without clear constraints and a near constant demand for multitasking. In a recent article in The Atlantic, Derek Thompson tackles what he calls workism amongst the professional or corporate classes. Workism is the belief that work is not only necessary for economic production, but also the core of our identity and our sense of life purpose. For some, writes Thompson, this takes the place of faith in our lives. It's the gospel of work. But, as he says, the problem with this gospel, your dream job is out there, so never stop hustling, is that it's a blueprint for spiritual and physical exhaustion. Long hours don't make anybody more productive or creative. They make people stressed, tired, and bitter. And while Thompson does not reveal a particular religious bias in his writing, he does, interestingly, use faith language to critique workism. He writes, "One of the benefits of being an observant Christian or Muslim is that these God-fearing worshipers put their faith in an intangible and unfalsifiable force of goodness. But work is tangible, and success is often falsified. So to make either the centerpiece of one's life is to place one's esteem in the mercurial hands of the market. Extreme success is a falsifiable God, which rejects the vast majority of its worshipers. So, as a corrective to the precariousness of workism, Thompson proposes the establishment of family-friendly labor policies, the encouragement of non-work pursuits, all practical measures to make work less central in our lives, to make room for other sources of fulfillment to emerge. He doesn't use faith language here, but we could. In a word, Sabbath. Sabbath is a crucial and vital word in both Hebrew and Christian scripture. When Moses stands at the top of Mount Sinai to receive the commandments, God says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it." That from chapter 20 of the book of Exodus. Then in chapter 5 of Deuteronomy, Moses repeats this commandment to the people of Israel pretty much word for word. But at the end, he adds one more consideration. He says, "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." So we can see that in the time of Moses, Sabbath was about rest and about remembering. To observe the Sabbath was to rest in the knowledge of God as creator and to remember God's liberating and life-changing power. In his book, Sabbath as Resistance, biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann explores these two scriptural sources around Sabbath from Exodus and Deuteronomy. And he says that these two passages model for us how Sabbath is to anxiety and resistance to coercion. The oppression of the Israelites was driven by Pharaoh's compulsion to build more storehouses and to keep all that he had acquired and accumulated, and to guard against famine in the future. In the commandments given to Moses on Sinai, Sabbath was a gift from the oppressive rhythm of slavery, and a new way for the Israelites to celebrate and to embody their freedom from the grueling labor and constant anxiety of needing to make more bricks, to make them faster, with even fewer resources, under threat of punishment for failing to produce enough. It's amazing what happens when we stop. Writes Brueggemann, Sabbath is an opportunity to recognize that we live by gift and not by possession. We live by gift and not by possession. And it wasn't enough just to stop work. It's worth noticing that fourth commandment that we heard in Exodus, that it places the positive command to keep the Sabbath holy before the prohibition to stop working. And in the book of Isaiah, the Sabbath is said to be a delight. So from its scriptural origins, Sabbath is about rest and remembrance and about holiness and delight. Reading through the prophets, however, we can detect a shift in the way that Sabbath is talked about. As the prophets summoned people back from moral failure, they called with increasing fervor for them to honor the Sabbath. Jeremiah implored them to stop carrying burdens through the gates of Jerusalem on the Sabbath. And Nehemiah went one step further, ordering the gates of the city to be closed and kept guarded on the Sabbath. And once in exile in Babylon, observing Sabbath became a way for the Israelites to maintain their cultural identity in a pagan environment. And over time, more and more specific regulations came to be layered into the Jewish tradition. Now, the Gospels tell us that Sabbath is something of a controversial topic for Jesus. On 6 different occasions, the Pharisees challenge Jesus for something he does on the Sabbath. In today's passage from Mark, Jesus's disciples are walking through a field, and they pluck some grains of wheat and eat them, when suddenly in the midst of that field appear some Pharisees who accuse them of violating Sabbath rules by walking too far out of their way and by harvesting on the Sabbath. And on this occasion, we hear Jesus offering 2 lines of defense. One has to do with his authority. He pushes back on the Pharisees, saying, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Here, Jesus is asserting that his authority comes from God and is therefore greater than the cultic laws developed by humankind. Now, the other defense that Jesus offers has to do with need. In this and in the other Sabbath challenges in the Gospels, Jesus indicates that there are occasions when something urgent overrides cultic observance, such as someone's health or well-being. In this case, it's hunger. Jesus points to the time that David and his friends entered the temple on the Sabbath and, hungry, ate the bread of presence, which would have been for the priests only. Likewise, his friends were hungry, and so they plucked grain from the fields to eat. And just after today's story, if we continue on in the Gospel of Mark, we hear about how Jesus heals a man's withered hand. Then he turns and says to his critics, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? To save life or to kill?" And on still other occasions, when he healed someone on the Sabbath, Jesus defended his actions, saying things like, "Would you not rescue an animal that had fallen into a well on the Sabbath? Or would you not give your animal to drink?" For Jesus, Sabbath was not an excuse to not help someone in need. As a community learning to follow Jesus, what can we glean today about the importance of Sabbath for us in the here and now? First, Sabbath is about stopping. Jesus himself modeled this over and over in his ministry. Throughout the Gospels, we hear how Jesus sought to get away from the crowds to find a quiet place where he could rest and spend time in prayer with his Father. It's good for us to remember that even Jesus didn't work 24/7. And Jesus spoke of himself as a source of rest when he said, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." Again, in the words of Workism, Sabbath provides time, space, energy, and imagination for coming to the ultimate recognition that more commodities, which are acquired in the rough and ready of daily economics, finally do not satisfy. Sabbath is restraint, withdrawal, or divestment from the concrete practices of society that specialize in anxiety. Bergman points to Jesus, who urged his followers, do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. Sabbath is a time to stop striving and to stop worrying, and instead to place ourselves in front of God, resting and trusting that God already knows what we need. But Sabbath isn't just about stopping. It's also about noticing what happens when we stop. This is what Jesus did. Invariably, he noticed someone in need and responded to them with immediacy, with healing, and with hope. And for us, what happens for us when we turn down the background noise, the chatter, and the commotion? It's amazing what happens when we stop. Who knows what deep need or what longing might make its way into that empty space? The person in need of healing, the earth in need of restoration, our souls in need of rest. Who knows what signs of new life, what unexpected glimpses of beauty or grace might wander through? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel writes that Sabbath is a day to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation. I invite you to do just that today, for even just a little while, to turn off your devices, to get outside and notice. Go for a walk and feel your feet connecting with the earth. Sit and bask in the heat of the sun, or listen for the song of the birds or the whisper of the breeze. Just notice. Sabbath calls us to stop. Sabbath calls us to notice. And lastly, Sabbath calls us to remember. To remember the fundamental reality that we are created beings and that we do not exist in a vacuum. We dwell amongst a great diversity of life forms. The great creation stories of Scripture tell us that humankind was created in a garden and given responsibility to respect and nurture the earth that would feed us and hold us. And it is God who created the universe and declared it good. As Christians, we follow Jesus by giving thanks and praise to our Creator, by putting our faith as he did in God's unfalsifiable force of goodness, a goodness that carries us through it all, from birth to growth, through holiness and delight, even suffering and death, ultimately to recreation and new life. Thanks be to God.
I have decided, I have resolved to wait upon you, Lord, my rock and redeemer, shield and reward. I'll wait upon you, Lord. the sun will rise, you'll come to us, certain as the dawn appears. You'll come, let your glory fall as you respond to us. Spirit, rain, flood into our thirsty hearts again. You'll come, you'll come. We are not shaken, we are not moved, we wait upon you, Lord. Mighty deliverer, triumphant truth, we wait upon you, Lord. As surely as the sun will rise, you'll come to us, certain as your word endures. You'll come, let your glory fall as you respond to us. Spirit, rain, flood into our thirsty hearts again. You'll come, you'll come. Chains be broken, lives be healed, eyes be opened, Christ is revealed. Chains be broken, lives be healed, eyes be open, Christ is revealed. You'll come, let your glory fall as you respond to us. Spirit,